you, Ziv. It's great to be here. This is, I believe, my third session with Landmark Ventures, maybe even my fourth. And I can tell you, if you're new to the Israeli technology community or to the Israel Dealmakers Summit, you're in for an exciting journey. And it really does feel like a journey. In fact, my journey started last year in February when Ziv invited me to Israel with Landmark in a small group. And already, before I even left, I was excited because two people in my group at Northwestern, the Kellogg Innovation Network, where I'm a faculty member, were already on the trip. Totally coincidental. Beth Comstock from GE, who will be here tomorrow, Carlos Dominguez from Cisco, who maybe some of you know. So it was exciting to be among friends and then to travel to this country I've read so much about, the Startup Nation, etc. Very exciting. And when I was there, two things really struck me. First of all, Ziv is good at setting people up. And he set us up big time, and that was when we took a chopper after all the exciting meetings in Tel Aviv, and we took a chopper from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and you see how incredibly small the space is, how concentrated the space is over the last, 5,000 years, and even though this is the mother of much of civilization, it is the father and mother of the future, and as Yossi Bardi might say, the Jewish mother of the future. And so I was thinking about this dynamic that we have in Israel, which is helping to create prosperity, the future, and many things we'll talk about on the panel with my colleagues. And it seemed to me that a nice metaphor might be the pressure cooker of innovation. Israel is the pressure cooker of innovation. And my friends from Procter & Gamble translated this for me as, I'm going to botch it up, but Sir Lachatz. The Sir Lachatz of innovation. Okay. With that, let's start a discussion about this Sir Lachatz from the perspective of very large corporations. It doesn't get much larger than Lockheed Martin, GE, or Procter & Gamble. And what we've asked our panelists today to talk about, first of all, give us a brief idea of your role with respect to innovation in your corporation, and then share one factor that you believe is critical for a large established organization to be sustainably good at innovating. What is one factor? Could be related to leadership, could be related to investment, portfolios, strategy, anything you think is critical. And give us a story. Explain an example, a good one or a bad one, and you get extra points for a failure. If you share a failure, you get extra points. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Joshua Shani from Lockheed Martin. Joshua.
Hi. First time I'm in a event like this, I look around here and I don't see anybody. I know a couple of people already, you guys. If you look at Lockheed Martin, 20 years ago plus, there was no involvement in the Israeli technology, Israeli industry at all. The companies of Martin Marietta and Lockheed separately, and GD part of it, were selling stuff to Israel, and that's it. During the years, there was a trend to look for offset. But offset is a big issue when you're talking about defense industry, which I may be different than many others here, because offset is not allowed by the Congress. The Congress simply say, wait a minute, guys, Israel, we give you the money to buy stuff in our industry, and now you want to make money on our money? It doesn't look fair. So offset turned into industrial cooperation. And industrial cooperation is just a part of the competition. I mean, we compete against going against a lot of Blum and others, so we want to show good things. So we started with this, and here is my point to the opening remarks. In one of the deals that we did a few years ago, which was huge, $4.5 billion, we made some commitments, which are not really commitments, as I just explained to you, of about 1.5 billion, and we are now, we have a surplus of $1 billion. And that was based on discovering the Israeli capabilities. And right now, the word offset or buybacks or industrial cooperation is still being used here and there, but they are not important anymore. Right now, a company like Lockheed Martin is looking at Israeli industries and finding there on a weekly basis innovation and smartness that benefits the company worldwide.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. But I want to point out you're being a little bit coy. Maybe there was not an opportunity to express this, but Joshua is a distinguished veteran of the Israeli military, and you can look him up if you're interested. It's a harrowing and exciting story. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael from General Electric with the same question. What's really critical at a big company to make advanced technology, which you lead, happen? And give us a story. Tell us something you've learned.
So my role is pretty simple. It's to pick the best ideas to accelerate company growth. We are a very diverse company, as you know. And I think that the thing which we focus on the most is to execute on difficult technologies better than our competition. That's basically very simple statement. It's hard to do. So we need to find the best ideas, which don't have to come from inside, and Israel plays a big part of it. Other venture plays a big part of it. But at the end of the day, execute on difficult technologies better than our competition. That's what drives the company growth, and that's how companies grow. We look for adjacencies, which we can kind of bolt to our businesses. It could be in oil and gas space, it could be in power generation space, it could be in aviation space. But again, we always look at very deep technology domains and how we can synergetically apply technology we have to other areas. Israel is specific to this discussion. We found a number of companies which very creative ideas. In almost each time we see an opportunity to help them to accelerate their innovation into the marketplace. I'm too far from the whiteboard. Okay. So, story about success or failure. I think success in executing on difficult technologies, let's say latest GNX engine for Boeing 787. It's absolutely the best thing today in the sky. A wonderful machine, delivers more than 50% energy efficiency or fuel burn efficiency, and 3/4 of what actually aircraft delivers. And the failure was when we tried to get into space of optical fields, when we still had plastic business. And I think the lesson learned was that to compete with clear, those of you who understand plastic business understand optics and how optical fields can actually enhance what you see on your LCD display. So what we learned there is the following: that we could not execute on difficult technology better than competition. We pulled up. And it was a right move, knowing where technology was going, where market was going, and being in a very tough head-to-head competition. So that's what I support.
Great. Well, Michael, expand your extra credit. How did that decision occur? Because I find that established organizations, corporations are not, it's often difficult to cancel something that, especially when you've committed a lot of time and resource. I know that's not the way it should be, but often it's hard to cancel things.
Yeah, so it's, every time you get to adjacency, we start with copper. Many of you know we start with a battery business. It's not lithium ion, it's a different chemistry. Every time you get an adjacency, you get into the space where you are not a big fish in a small pond, in the relative sense. In the aircraft engines, we are a good-sized fish in pretty good pond, so we feel good. When you get into optical film business, you are a small fish with other bigger fishes in the pond. And I think realization of what you can and cannot do, and how fast you can do it, and how fast is the market goes, really put you back to the place where you need to make a decision.
So there's sort of a mismatch often between the cadence of a new market and the cadence of an established company, and then also the size of that market in the early stages compared to what the corporation might demand in a certain period of time to achieve scale.
Yes, achieving the scale in a market which is very hotly competitive, and people move with a different speed in innovation while you're trying to catch up. You need to kind of have it all in perspective.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quick story from Levi Strauss about a decade ago. They were developing clothing line to conform with consumer electronics. It was a pretty good set of ideas, really neat designs. And it took them about 18 months to get the first designs out based on the work they had done with consumer electronics. And then they announced to their partners they were ready to launch, and their partners said, well, those were the products we launched 18 months ago. What do you got now? The cadence was completely wrong. So figuring out how to sync that is really difficult. So, Sophie, what have you learned at Procter & Gamble about making this work?
So in Procter, I think, so my role is in innovation. I'm the founder and the leader of P&G Israel House of Innovation, which is the innovation house of P&G located in Israel. I think that the few factors on those big corporations, because I mean, we are not in the military industry, but we are in the consumer industry, and pretty big footprint. I think that there are three main principles and values that are there in order to I would say, ignite the passion for innovation and to create the innovation house. First and foremost, our simple, I would say, purpose, which is to touch life and improve life. So when you are in the fast-moving consumer good and in product like us, our obsession is, I mean, with small but meaningful ways, how do we improve our product so that the consumer will benefit. The two others are, I think, innovation is our lifeblood, and this is something that we live throughout all our life with P&G. And the third one that I would say is our definite obsession for being number one, therefore passion for winning and really challenging the status quo. So I think that's overall, from a principle standpoint, what is the overarching of how innovation was stimulated. Now, the little story or anecdote, probably the best one is to share with you how we created this Israel House of Innovation. Because maybe to put it in perspective, Procter is a company of more or less $84 billion that touches every day 4.4 billion consumers. Okay, just to put in perspective. Now, Israel, I mean, you are all, I mean, it's what, 7 million, I mean, if we are generous, 7.5 million consumers. So what the hell you can think about having a global innovation center, I would say serving a company like Procter, so a big monster, I would say sourcing from Israel, from this tiny, I would say, landscape. And I think that the thing over there is, it all started by, I mean, very young, it was a very young subsidiary. I was a very young general manager.
Which you still are, of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I appreciate being the only woman on the panel. I appreciate this compliment. Thank you very much. So you know, it all starts by delivering the results. In Procter, we have 3 main results when we are young manager. First and foremost, number one in the category, so business is the right to talk, even to open the mouth. The second thing is to have an infrastructure to recruit the best and to nurture and to train the best. And the third one is to give back to community. So when you're young, you try to deliver that very well and meet above expectations so that you continue to perform. This was the case, but while doing that, and living the purpose, which is challenging the status quo, innovation from Israel became an obvious win for me. And in fact, I started to put together what the country can offer and the real need of the corporation. And then it was pretty simple, or not simple. It was just about how to, I would say, convince the corporation to invest. And then what I learned, I don't know if I was completely out of my mind at the time, but to have the courage and the leadership to go to the highest level of the company. And I think that we had to create the shortcut in order to be able to generate enough, I would say, interest and support. So we went directly to the CIO, to the CTO and the CEO in order to be able to open the structure. And I think this was the only way in a very organized and structured company like ours, delivering the results so that you have the right to talk, and then I would say leveraging what the country has to offer and promoting it to the highest level of the country.
Great. So let's use that last comment about what the country has to offer as a segue into a second topic. And as I do this, I'm hoping, we don't have that much time, these are rapid panels, but I'm hoping you'll be able to take one or two questions from the room, so be ready in a moment. So I want to transition to a second topic we discussed before the panel, and that is you're all very large companies. It's difficult for large companies typically to interact with entrepreneurs, with technologists, with university researchers, et cetera, because they operate completely differently. They have different languages, and I don't mean Hebrew and English. I mean big companies speak, small companies speak. What are some of the things that each of you have learned about how to make that interface more effective?
Seems a difficult question for me to answer, and you'll understand in a minute why. I always feel one example, which I forgot earlier. I use the example of the F-16. The F-16 line in Lockheed Martin about 15 years ago was about to shut down completely. There were no customers. They sold about 3,000 of those, which is they did tons of money, but still no customers. And then the Israeli Air Force decided, after a big competition, to buy the aeroplane. But they didn't like the aeroplane as such. The aeroplane was not good enough. And like normally, the Israelis are re-engineering the products at the end of the day. And they started to re-engine not engine, but re-engineering, the aeroplane, and added lots of Israeli capabilities and technologies in the aeroplane. Maybe instead of Block 50, made Block 52 plus, never mind this. This changed everything, and the aeroplane jumped to another generation of capabilities. And another 6 or 7 countries started to buy it, maybe 1,000 more. I think we reached 4,000 in a number, which about 25% of it is made by Israeli technologies inside this airplane. That's how Lockheed Martin integrated Israeli technology. But for the second question, a short answer, it's not easy for a monster like Lockheed Martin to work with small Israeli companies. It's not impossible. We are doing it from time to time. It's very difficult, and most of the time we encourage the small companies to team with one of the big companies on an issue, with the Rafael and the Elbits and the IAIs and the IMIs of Israel, to team with them, say, Lockheed Martin say, we like this technology, but how about you team with Elbit and work together with Elbit against us? And that works very nicely.
So you're a Yentl, you're a matchmaker.
Matchmaker.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Michael.
So, as I said before, we're looking for best ideas, and we're pretty sure that we don't have all the best ideas. So, ability to pick the best ideas leads you to collaborations. We collaborate with universities. We do not have overarching agreements. But we ask our researchers, for example, in global research, to go and find somebody who is smarter than you are. That's how we're going to get started. So we have, as I said, over 300 collaborations with universities all around the world. With the small companies or startups, initial growth, with seed companies to growth stage companies, we created G Ventures, and best concept I will count on it tomorrow. But it's really, we've been in it now for, in different manifestation of this model for the last 5 years. We have focused on energy, very broad energy, from clean tech to oil and gas to renewables to biofuels, very large portfolio. And then we have a big fund which focuses on healthcare products. We are not a pharmaceutical company, G is not. We are in imaging, and we monitoring, and we patient safety and all this other stuff. So what we see in Israel is just a variety of very innovative, creative people who have great ideas. Another thing we like is people are focused. So in other words, they don't wait for 5-7 years to go and figure out if the idea works. They will quickly run through Juggler experiments and understand how to build the company moving forward. We like that model a lot. And as I said in opening remarks, we believe that many of the technologies, being in energy space or in healthcare space, really can benefit, the startups can greatly benefit from collaboration with large companies. We are not perfect, we're continuously learning, but I think we found a way to engage, to debate technical merit of the invention, assist in many ways, to bring us scale of supply chain and technical capabilities, and of course, market and ability to take something through the distribution. So we are very happy with our investment in Israel, and we're going to have more.
Michael, on that point, if there's somebody in the room that has something they say, boy, this could be great for GE, in addition to accosting you with great, what are other things they would do to try and engage with your company?
We have a team in Israel which basically works with the startup. We have specialists in healthcare, in energy space, in optics, in different areas of expertise. In addition to our healthcare business, which is over 400 people in Israel. And this connection, they actually help us to connect with small companies. It's more, 8 hour, 9 hour difference all the time, and trying to get to somebody to talk to. So having a small team in place in Israel, continuously touching, engaging, running interference, so to speak, making sure they engage with the right people. And that team reports it's one of the things we do in Israel. Normally I would not have a team of 7 people reporting, but we do it in Israel, we do it in Japan, we do it in Russia. Small team that they report directly, because otherwise they're going to get lost in the company.
Right, thanks. Sophie.
Very, very similar. In Procter, we call the matchmaking connect and develop. So in fact, the way we are organized is we have a small team, also us on the ground, multidisciplinary. So this is very unique. In Procter, we usually work by specialty in silo. In IHI, we are multidisciplinary, so IT, research, product supply, marketing, and R&D. And we are operating together. Either we are receiving a brief and we look for the opportunity, we start and we look for the opportunity and we bring it back, or we have the opportunity and we find the right connection within the company in order to make this moving. Now what we have learned is exactly as was said before, it's extremely difficult, it's not impossible, but it's extremely difficult for a startup or a small company to find its way within the company, within PNU. And in fact, we do a lot of translation, and we accompany our startups or our entrepreneur within the company to find the right path and the right connection. Because it's pretty broad, and the application of innovation is far beyond the product only. So I think that's what we have learned, and that is working pretty well. We have all kinds of business model. We do joint venture, we do investment in partnership. We announced another one 2 weeks ago with a data company, Verix. We are doing it with a partnership with university, where we sign specific agreement for research. So we have all kinds of models, and this has proved to be pretty, I would say, successful and helpful for the company. Same learning as what you were saying is we go directly to the CTO also, because otherwise we are lost somewhere in the process. So that's also a learning. I don't know if it is into Israel only, but somehow it's the same learning we have.
Well, you mentioned translation, and I know you didn't mean from Hebrew to English. Give us an example of a translation challenge, and while you think about it, I'll give you a quick example. I have a former student who was an entrepreneur at the time, and he came to me, he was all excited. He connected with the vice president of the corporation, and on the business card, the title looked perfect for what he was doing. And this fellow said, boy, this is great, we're going to put you on the fast track. And so he came out of the meeting, being an entrepreneur, hearing, we're going to do this fast. I said, well, what does that mean exactly? He said, I don't know, what, like a month we'll have a contract? I said, maybe you better go back and ask him what fast track means. And sure enough, it turns out it was a term of art at their company, which meant a different budget cycle than the annual budget cycle. So he was on the 6-month fast track.
You said it all. I have few. Among one that is a very nice ending story. We saw a technology with the CTO 5 years ago. that was brilliant. I mean, and a technology that allows to have abnormal alert of abnormal pattern of data. Okay, so if it sells by SKU, it's very good for us. So, and we said, if really the technology, we can have a proof of concept and just deliver. And said, deliver the result. This is spot on. I mean, we have so many millions of data points per day that this would be very helpful. And for us, it was at the time the CIO and myself. We said, Mia was the business. He was the expert in technology. We said this, and boy, we just need the proof of concept. Let's find a business unit that has enough data, and we're going to go. And we were within the company, so we were not the student on the fast track, or so. But we thought we were not too bad. And in fact, it took us 3 years to sign a contract, to invest in the company, and just to apply it. It's not that we were particularly slow, I must say, because I have a drive and he has a drive. But the fact is, there are much more, I would say, consequences to use as a daily routine in a company that is having 130,000 people, having a footprint the size of P&G, in order to make it part of the daily routine. So the translation for the startup was a real translation, and we had to accompany, to support, to help throughout the day. Now everybody is an happy end, so that's why I'm sharing. We had also sometimes to stop a collaboration because the counterpart from P&G was not answering fast enough. So to protect the ecosystem and the entrepreneur, we just said, you know what, doesn't smell good, let's make sure that we don't waste your time. That's about the job of the matchmaking that we are doing.
And it's important sometimes to make those tough calls and say, don't waste your time with us right now, we're not ready. Because if you don't do that, the word gets around. And then people say, oh man, don't go to that company because they take forever, they sound good, and they never respond. It's really important. Well, we're running out of time, but I do want to open the floor for one question. You were first, sir, so jump in.
Thank you, Max Pharma. I was wondering, as leading innovators in the world, what is your view regarding the fact that many people would say innovation to be successful in and of itself has to be somewhat disruptive, or maybe extremely disruptive? How do you feel about that? And secondly, as you all manage major entities, how do you take the best aspects of that disruption and permeate it through your organization? Are you sort of over here, or how do you deal with that? I imagine that comes up quite a lot.
So must successful innovation be disruptive? In less than 1 minute.
Okay, so we have a number of disruptive innovations. And we look at many of them. Literally, I see 70 plus companies a year, and they've been sorted from hundreds of companies. What you find is not every innovation is scalable, or what it takes to scale the innovation. What you find is some innovations are scalable. You need to prepare a company for moving, to adapt to this new innovation. And I can give you a number of examples. I mean, let's say, probably the best additive manufacturing. That's a disruption for GE, and we need to be a big part of it, we need to lead in it, but it completely can disrupt the supply chain. Another one I'll give you probably industrial interface. Machine-to-machine communication for GE, where we have huge install base, will completely change our service offering, and we need to be right on top of it. So disruptions are happening, and we just need to understand which one is really disruption.
Anybody else want to add? Great, not obligatory. So we're coming down to the end. I know this was a rapid fire panel, and you all have lots of things to discuss. Fortunately, given the way that Steve has designed this, you're going to have time to speak with our panelists personally. But I wanted to share a couple observations from what we heard. First of all, Joshua pointed out that 20 years ago there was very little engagement between Lockheed Martin and Israel beyond perhaps as a client customer. And that's completely different today. I would say that that's a good proxy for almost every established corporation in the world. The last decade especially has seen an extraordinary increase in engagement of large companies across Israel. It's quite impressive. And I would say in my travels, second only to Silicon Valley in many ways. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact, Michael, you were talking about having your individuals focused in electro-optics or various technology sets. You have them in Russia, you have them in Israel, you have them in various parts of the world. But as corporations like GE see things that are interesting and they see them more and more and over again, you're not done. You start to allocate more resources. So success breeds success, and this is what we're seeing. You also said execute better on technology. That's one of the biggest challenges for any large company, because we get good at what we do, and that's how we've made money for the last 30 years, and that new disruptive stuff doesn't fit. And so having people like you all use the term like Sherpa, a matchmaker, an advocate, and this is a critical function. If you're in a large corporation and you do not have a Sherpa function somewhere in your organization, you're doing it wrong. You need to have those people to do the translating, to do the discovery, so they can say, look, I know that Jim's title looks great on the business card, but for gosh sake, don't talk to Jim. He hates this stuff. Talk to Julie. She's your advocate inside. They can help you translate your pitch. Take the technology, speak out of the front, put it in the back, and put the value proposition and how this is going to be meaningful for P&G into the front. Also, Sophie, you talked about creating multidisciplinarity in your organization, and that's really anathema to the way that large organizations evolve, having silos to be efficient at what they do. So there's good reasons for it, but it drives a lot of the innovation out. And then how do we have courage and leadership? We've all talked about courage in different ways. But I particularly loved your comment, Sophie. Right at the very beginning, you said, so what the hell are we doing in Israel? Well, I think it's pretty clear what you're doing in Israel. And I'll close this panel by pointing out a prediction that one of the great economists and theorists of innovation in history, Joseph Schumpeter, Professor Schumpeter in the early part of this last century, pointed out, everyone reveres him, and you might recognize his name from the Economist article, Schumpeter. He's a great man. He used entrepreneurship for the first time the way we use the word. He showed that the only path to new value in the economy in the long run is innovation. Brilliant. But there was one thing that most people disagreed with him on. And that was that he said that eventually large established organizations will have the innovation advantage. And he made that assertion in about 1940 or so. And many people since have said, well, the great man was wrong. I don't know if it'll ever be entirely true, but I have seen in my 20 years in this space significant change in the way that large organizations attempt to manage and drive innovation. And so maybe in the long run, you might have a point. Thanks a lot to our panel for your contribution.